This is only 10 minutes. Good afternoon. How is everybody? So I'm talking about partnering for climate change and building resilience. I'm a professor at Feliciano Business School. I teach corporate social responsibility. For 15 years, I headed corporate social responsibility for Wyndham Worldwide. And created the sustainability program there from scratch. So I'm teaching academics, which is awesome, to students about how you do this pragmatically in the corporate world. And so I know I only have 10 minutes. I have quite a few slides here, but I'm just going to breeze through them and give you an idea of how we can actually resolve this. So we know we're going from 7 billion to 9 billion. Next slide. And the resource depletion is unprecedented. Basically 50% of all trees have been destroyed, and biodiversity is down by 58%. Next slide. And fresh water shortage, everybody knows about Cape Town, but I was looking at the list. Mexico City, Miami, Tokyo, Beijing are all at risk to lose and have the same issue. And I'm like, are we just sitting here waiting for this to happen, or are we coming up with solutions? And that's what I want to talk about, building resiliency. Next slide. And so we know that through technology, which she was just talking about, mobile technology, which I think is phenomenal because it actually will be the way that we're able to work with developing countries and within our own country to come up with solutions for social good. Next slide. So with climate change, which is a result of what we saw, population growth and the impact to people globally, but more importantly to resources, and seeing up close and personal, traveling all over the world with our hospitality division and seeing what's happening with our assets and what's happening to the people, it's real. So the next slide is about the most expensive hurricane season, which was last year. Let's knock on wood and pray that this year we don't have the same thing, because the trajectory that we're on is to continue to have these types of storms. So, we know about the Category 3 storms that are now at Category 4. We know that the unprecedented number, but also the amount of rainfall. And it's not just rainfall, it's wildfires, it's, compounding. But for the insurance industry, it was almost $400 billion in damage, and they are starting to say that we can no longer insure for this. So how do you manage? So my next slide is about what I think was a very wise statement with Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change, and that is what we're going through. We have to adapt. And to adapt is to leverage what we know, the technology, the know-how, and build resiliency, because that's what we're in and going through. So I am talking about the next slide, about the stakeholders who care. And I saw it, and I'm seeing it, and you are seeing it up close and personal. Customers who we work with are asking us what, from a corporate standpoint, what are you doing about environmental issues, social issues? Human rights is a huge one, as well as diversity issues, as well as privacy issues. And it continues to grow. Next slide, investors. So now we have investors who are starting to track companies. I was fortunate to have a company that was a Dow Jones sustainability leader. We were proactive, but they have tracked those companies who incorporate what they call environmental social governance into their corporate governance processes, and not only focus on profits, but also focus on ESG. And they found that those companies that did that do much better than those that do not. I'm simplifying this tremendously. So the investment in this category has grown exponentially. It's in the trillions of dollars, and people want to have sustainable businesses to invest in, and that's why they're doing it. They're getting smart, and they're actually asking board of directors and companies to work and actually respond to these questions about this. Governments, I was fortunate to work with a global company, and even within the academic setting, working with other institutions, seeing the legislation around environmental social governance. Happy to see that that these legislation has been accelerating, to be honest with you. So, it started out with 100, and then it was 1,000 just different legislative acts that you have to respond to from a portfolio perspective. And what has been difficult was that we were responding to not only at the city and state and country level, but there was no global, initiative. And so when you look at how you're managing risk and being proactive, looking at how governments as stakeholders is another key area. And last is employees. So the people we work with today, I keep hearing it's millennials, but I'm going to tell you the boomers, I'm a boomer, we care too. We want to make sure that we have something for our children, right? So when you look at this and you look at, it's the right thing to do for employees. And, everybody's like, okay, we can make profits, but what's the purpose here? And at the end of the day, you don't leave a job for the money, you leave it for the people you work with and for the organization, whether it has a purpose or not. So I just simplified this because I know I have 10 minutes. Going on to next slide, solutions. So global solutions. I'm so excited to be here and talk about global solutions. I feel like this presentation that we're all giving needs to be given to those who are not doing it so that they can see how to do this. And maybe, she was talking about mobile technology. Maybe you do small snippets of the speeches and examples that are given here, put it on mobile technology and let it go around the world, because that's going to be the best way to get it out. And we are talking to the choir here, sincerely. And I feel like if we could do something like that with the content to help facilitate, because we need everybody working together. Next slide. So building resiliency. So Rockefeller Center has started this 100 resilient cities. I see other organizations also working on this, because the cities that are at risk, like I was talking about, Miami, New York, all of the coastal cities, which are the major urban cities around the world, has to deal with, have infrastructure, have policies, work with the people in their respective cities. So this is an excellent organization that's been developing solutions and sharing it with each other and rolling it out, because this is what we're in the, currently in the adaptation. Next slide. And then within the United States Green Building Council, which I was on the board for many years, has announced a certification around resiliency called RELY. It just launched almost 2 years ago, and it is helping cities, communities deal with extreme weather, climate change, and how do you build your buildings. And I was going through this up close and personal as well as we go through these disasters. How do you build these buildings and infrastructures to be resilient despite the ongoing storms that we're occurring? So those are two organizations that's working on a global basis. Next slide. But within nonprofit groups, smaller companies, key drivers of corporate social responsibility, I believe, falls into these three categories: collaboration, innovation, and leadership. And if you I'm just going to give you a quick example real quick. So within philanthropy, experiencing those disasters last year and working with our organization as storm after storm hit, the biggest question is, how do you help the people who are impacted, right? They don't have homes, they don't have food. And so we partnered with Save the Children, an organization called the Emergency Assistance Foundation, and developed an online system so that we could support the people who were impacted, particularly our employees. And that was one solution. Next slide, in terms of collaboration, is human rights. So as we go around the world and we see children and women being trafficked and young men as well, how do we develop solutions to help with that and also identify it within the supply chain, which is a big deal? So we partnered with ECPAC and Polaris, two organizations that work and do tremendous work in this area and develop training, education, but also techniques for how do we solve it. Next slide is social innovation. So as I said, in terms of deforestation, almost at 50%, we partnered with Arbor Day because we understand the need to regenerate our biodiversity, and we planted over 1 million trees. But we also developed a coffee program, which was out of South America, where coffee is naturally grown under shade, but what they do is they basically cut down trees and develop coffee farms. So we developed this program, and by not cutting down the trees, we were purchasing over 250,000 pounds of coffee that we put into our timeshare business, and we saved 25 million acres of trees every year. But then we took the money and we gave a percentage towards the medical and school of the farmers as to help them as they went forward. And we also made sure that women and men had fair wages. How do we know that? We went through and audited every 2 years to make sure that that was happening. Next slide. Innovation in supply chain, we partnered with Centos. This was many years ago, where we said we can have a uniform program made out of plastic bottles. And it was funny, at that time, my son is an ultimate Frisbee player. I don't know if you heard of the sport, but he wore uniforms by Patagonia. And Patagonia is very, very eco-friendly, and those uniforms are made out of plastic bottles. So when I was developing the Wind and Green program, I asked them about the uniform program, and I said, can we have one out of plastic bottles? And so they said, I'm not sure we can do that. And I said, let's go talk to Patagonia. They've done it for years. So it took about 18 months, but we developed a uniform program out of plastic bottles. And if you just go back one, those uniforms took 18 months. But they were initially, and this was the big deal, they were a little bit more expensive. But over time now, they're cost neutral. And because the story was so compelling, the front desk would wear the uniform and says, ask me about my Wind and Green uniform. And people say, what about your uniform? My company uniforms are made out of plastic bottles, 25 on average. People who were coming there were like, that's awesome. So, and gave a sense of pride to the front desk, but also we were doing the right thing in terms of the overall supply chain. So that's just one example of something where we partnered with an organization. And this is a standard uniform program now in their current program. They expanded it to housekeeping. They expanded it to the operations manager. So it can be done. And next slide is tourism innovation, and this is Landel Green Parks in the Netherlands. So proud of the CEO. I'm finishing up. It was Thomas Herkins, and he said we are going to have a zero footprint. And he was the first brand president to step up and say that within our organization, because we were going for a 50% reduction in our carbon footprint. We reached 43% last year, so proud of that. But he actually put the gamut out there, and he actually was 85% of the way there. The footprint, and it was not only energy, but water, and this is important, his customer satisfaction went up 2 points. So was not an either or. Last is around business innovation. I truly believe that we have to leverage technology. We've developed a system to track and measure our footprint in over 100 countries. This is critical. And as we look at how do we reduce and improve our metrics, we need a global system, and I truly believe it has to be enabled mobily. So 43% in savings, $91 million. So at the end of the day, should be the last slide, it's about leadership. And it's about saying, how can we do it? And working with organizations through innovation, through collaboration, and partnering together. Thank you.